Welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Braxton Hunter, and along with me today is
Jonathan Pritchett.
And today we have an exciting show. There are many of you already lined up. For those that don't know, we're a little bit more relaxed and take our time on the Friday live stream. But today we have a very interesting topic. Apparently, lots of people here for this topic, Pritchett.
Yeah, I didn't know it'd be that interesting, but I think they're here for us because
That's got to be it.
We are interesting.
That's why the same number of people showed up last week.
And happy
right?
Good Friday to everyone.
Yeah,
this is a day of reflection that you know Jesus went to the cross for. Unless you're one of those people who insist on like Wednesday or Thursday, but today we think about the death of Jesus and what that meant, that he made atonement for our sins. So
yeah, and do you know 2006? I was on Good Friday and the entire week preaching at a church the previous Sunday and the Easter Sunday in the Bahamas, Nassau, the Bahamas.
Slumming it for the Lord, for
Fantastic experience. Yeah. But anyway, here we are on this Good Friday, and I would much rather be here, honestly. I would much rather be here right now.
Than in the Bahamas?
You're
insane. I would much rather be in I've been to the Bahamas once, and I loved it. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about some conservative commentators that are on YouTube, and I know that a lot of our listeners and followers and viewers, they watch these programs. We watch some of them sometimes. You know, sometimes I take a break from fitness videos to watch popular YouTubers like some of these guys, the Daily Wire, I think, and Temple. I'll watch Temple, and I'll watch the Young Turks and watch all the battles that they get into on Twitter. Because you made me get on Twitter. Now that I get on Twitter, I misbehave all the time.
You were listening off the conservatives, then you went to some liberal type shows. David Pakman. How do you say that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I mostly watch, fitness videos, but and homesteading videos. But every now and then even New Testament theology. I'll even watch some Christian YouTube. I'll even watch the Trinity Radio.
100% of my content that I watch is apologetic or Christian stuff related to the worldview debate and beard quaffing videos.
See, you need to get into homesteading and fitness, man.
So, all right, let's get into it, Pritchett.
Yeah, so we got some clips because some of these folks, they claim to be Christians. I have no reason to think they're insincere about that. Mm-hmm. There's also an issue with some of the humor and tactics they use can be a little bit
rough.
Some of it can be vulgar.
At least rough.
Yeah, at least rough. Some of it could be quite vulgar. So there's a question mark about that and how Christians should behave in public. I know that a lot of that's debated, and we can debate that as well.
Yeah, what's going to come up as we look at some video clips that you have for us?
Yeah, and so let's get into this. But one thing that they do is they profess to be Christians, and then they mention Jesus stuff. So I discovered the transcript feature on YouTube, so I went and searched for Christian things and the episodes for the last 3 weeks, and I came up with 6 clips. So I wanted to watch them and see what we thought.
Talk about them.
Yeah, see what we thought. So go ahead and run the first. I think the first clip is Steven Crowder.
It's a question for everyone. As someone who's a new practicing Christian and so many churches out there falsely teaching, how do you find a Bible preaching and Christ teaching church?
It's true, by the way, and I kind of was writing this down. And by the way, some people will be offended by me saying this is just my opinion as far as theology, and this is something that certainly would be probably unilaterally agreed upon in the Protestant church. Look, you need to have some I guess I should say boundaries, right? You need to have, like, there are state borders and there are national borders. Pastor Mark Driscoll, I believe, explained that when we did a National Wednesday with him, where, like babies being baptized versus adults, where some denominations see it as more of a dedication than baptism. Right, that's a state board. People can have differing opinions, right? People can have differing opinions. Some people, I'm not talking about Seventh-day Adventists, but some people believe the Sabbath is actually Saturday as opposed to Sunday. Okay, there are some differing opinions. There are different views. Some people are a little more legalistic on the Sabbath, which I would say is veering towards, kind of national borders. Right. But I actually wrote down what I think are, for me, if I saw this, I would leave. If you're looking for a Bible preaching church. So any church that would deny the existence of hell, no, it's okay. You're beyond national borders, right? It removes and it's addressed ad hominem in the New Testament, and anyone who says that it's not would have to be adding to the books after the New Testament, right? And there would have to be some kind of rule of it being superseded by new books, and that happens a lot, right? You even see that not just with hell, but like with Islam, they do believe in hell to whatever degree that they do, but they believe that Jesus was not who he claimed to be, and that's because they add books to it that say it wasn't. And so the Quran is more important than the New Testament and the Old Testament, even though they claim that they follow it. Another one will be any church that denies the divinity of Christ or the Holy Trinity. I think you right away some alarm bells should go up, and I would also say that any church that says that salvation is earned rather than good works being fruits of a changed heart through salvation. In other words, works come afterward. You can't work your way into God's grace or heaven. There's no way that you can. So those are kind of some I have found that if you set those, there are a lot of denominations, by the way, and a lot of non-denominational churches that still fit into that box. Usually when you get out, you're getting into something that is no longer what would be mainstream Christianity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the best way to do this, the Bible actually gives you a prescription on this. And churches or Christians in general do themselves such a great disservice because you don't want to focus on looking for what is wrong. You want to know what is right so well that what is wrong will be obvious, right? And so that's Acts 17:11 when it's talking about Paul, I'm sorry, not Paul, but when they're talking about going to the Bereans, I believe, and saying like they were willing to openly receive me with all readiness, like, and that's a miracle in and of itself. They're willing to listen. But here's the part. They searched the scriptures daily to see if what I said was true. Yeah. Right? They received what I said, but then they searched the scriptures to say, hey, is this really true? That's what you're supposed to do as a Christian. Right. You're supposed to do that. So that the real simple answer.
But that takes a little bit longer time. So I think setting these are non-negotiable wrongs.
There's some non-negotiables for sure. Yeah, exactly. But just understand, like, your job is to study the real so that you will understand when you see the fake.
Okay, so everyone needs to become professional exegetes. That's what I heard. I'm all for that, right? Be a good Berean. But I guess essentially... I guess he's, buddies with Mark Driscoll, so that might be weird.
He said something about the church, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think he said something about having Mark Driscoll on, and they talked about the state borders versus national borders, which I guess is like denominations. You can all, I guess if you look at like a big tent, like the nation of Christianity, and there's different denominations, but some things are outside the nation or outside the tent or beyond the camp or however you want to say it.
That's how he's looking at it.
Yeah, and he mentioned things like denying the existence of hell, for example.
Yes. Now, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But first, Dustin Paulson says, political pundits are not theologians and really are just mouthpieces for a political party that uses Christianity, not one that represents it. Pritchett?
Well, depends. I don't want to say that every politician that or pundit, commentator, whatever, that says they're a Christian is not, and they're just using it for something. Because clearly, for most of the shtick that these guys go on about, is not trying to use Christianity for something else, right? But what they are doing is everyone who professes Christ has to represent Christ, right? Mm-hmm. And you could say that there are things that they do on their programs that probably do not reflect Christ very well,
Well, okay, so let's get into this thing.
So I think
this
there's
actually a great example. I haven't seen these,
Yeah.
And you have them on like double speed or 1.5 or something, the clips you gave me. Yeah. Some people hate that. If you're on double speed, that's like, what is that?
Well, I didn't want them to take forever because it's more important that you listen to us than listen to
But hell, okay, so that, like, this is a great example. Like sometimes these conservatives because conservatives, whatever you think about whatever else they say of this sort, these types of conservatives do point to the Bible as their foundation for all these things, point to God and their faith and all these things. And generally, like usually they're just kind of giving you the general Christian picture, stuff that, Christians have heard, because they're usually using these things to say, hey, Christians, you've heard this, right? So now go do this, right? Okay, but whether you agree with the ideology or the whatever they're pushing to do, you should be able to agree with the general statements that they make. But when they get into specifics, sometimes, like here with Stephen Crowder, you've got this discussion about hell. Well, he says it's not a biblical or it's not a Bible preaching church or whatever if they say there's no hell. Well, I think that discussion requires some more nuance, because I have many conditional immortality friends who believe in annihilationism, who are, like Chris Tate's a young earth creationist. He's definitely wanting to go with what does the Bible say. Now, it's true that Christians disagree about what the Bible says about the nature of hell. That's absolutely true. And it is also true that the majority of the history of the church has been that it's an eternal conscious place of torment. But there are Bible-believing Christians who affirm conditional immortality, and for those people, some of them, might believe that hell is an actual place. It's just the place where you're annihilated or something. Yeah. And they all believe that Jesus points to Gehenna.
Certainly some of the more fervent, less ecumenical type of eternal conscious torment advocates will say that being an annihilationist or a conditional immortality person is denying hell.
Yeah, I can understand why people would say that.
If you deny eternal conscious torment, you deny hell itself.
You're denying hell. What we're talking about is a place of some sort. I don't know exactly what Stephen Crowder believes, but a place of some sort, and classically a place of flames and darkness and, seemingly impossibly, but place of flames and darkness and whatever else. Brimstone, actual brimstone.
Well,
I don't know if that's what he's thinking of. Or you could go with the J.P. Moreland, like the response that says, well, no, it is eternal conscious torment, but it's not like the flames and stuff. That could be imagery and stuff.
Conscious
but so it's not like that. Come on, that's a cartoon. But then some of these same people will then say, but that's actually way worse than what you were thinking of with flames, not in a way that you can't quite connect
all
with.
The air conditioning of hell that I showed that Al Mohler whines about, that his own professors spew about this. Oh, it's not literal fire. There's all kinds of versions of eternal conscious torment. We have the eternal goleming, where you
become more and more
you become less human,
unhuman, sort of.
And so there's all kinds of views of that, but a lot of people would say. So I don't know how denying hell, like denying. Maybe you could go as far as saying universalists, but not even all universalists deny hell. So I think there was a commenter earlier that says probably you shouldn't go to these people for theology, but if they're going to make a theological claim by denying hell, you say, okay, well, what does that mean? Because there are even universalists, and I think universalism is like the least likely of all the views. Like I give it like a 0.0.
What? Universalism?
Yeah, that it's ever that's true. But I'm just saying, even universalists, some variety, would affirm hell for at least a period of time.
But the other two things that he said, I agree with.
The justification by faith.
I thought he said the divinity of Christ and
that, and then
the Trinity.
And then he said, "Don't earn the salvation."
Oh yeah, don't earn. Yeah, okay.
Now that would need these nuance, because I don't think that.
Not for me.
Like Mormons,
I don't need to nuance that. I'm with him.
Well, Mormons would definitely fall into that category, but whereas Catholics don't like when Protestants say that that's what they believe when that's not what they believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't need to nuance it.
Well, I don't either. I'm not a Catholic, but I'm just saying,
I don't need to nuance it for Catholics.
I don't. Yeah. Well, I mean,
all right, here we go. Jim Amberg. I don't mean that like, if we're asking what do we think about this, he said that, I go yes, right? But if you want to say something to
I think overall asterisk by the hell thing. I mean, because I was like, what do you mean? Because I know what certain people mean by it, and people mean different things. The polemics involved in the hell debate.
Yeah, when you say hell, what do you mean? You got to, because that's a term, like, right, that is given to several biblical.
Well, if you say Chris Tate denies hell because he's a conditional immortality, I'm going to say that that's not denying hell.
It's certainly not denying judgment. Is that what we mean?
Well, it's not denying hell either.
Right. It's not denying a place of separation from God where people might be annihilated or not.
Yeah.
Right?
So denying hell, do you mean denying eternal conscious torment, or do you mean denying hell altogether of any way of hell? Because, like, I typically say stay away from universalist churches, and I'm sorry if this shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it. But most, in my experience, of those churches also take on a whole bunch of other bad theology as well.
I don't know enough.
But you can say the same thing about a lot of egalitarians too. If you
Well,
see an egalitarian church, a lot of them might also take on a whole bunch. And I'll admit that as well. There's a lot of like when we had the Rick Warren thing, I ranted about egalitarians, and I am one. So
just
I'm happy
the idea is guilt by association thing. Don't.
I do agree with the be a good Berean, regardless of
course
what church you go to. So I mean, overall, I give this a B-.
Yeah, I'm inclined to give it more. But Jim Amberg, and I don't
Well,
even
you're
watch
a professor too. What would you grade
I don't
it?
watch Steven Crowder. I'm not going to grade him. He's not playing for seminary here. If he's playing for seminary, he's got to do a little better.
Look, more people watch that than go to seminary.
That's true. And that's true.
So they need what would you grade it? They need your seminary expertise to give it a grade.
You said a B-?
I said a B-.
I give it a B and tell him to think deeply about give him some books to read about hell.
Yes, but the last guy said something about he's going to do apologetics on their little mug club. So they have their own pay service like David
I've never
Wire
seen that
has.
guy before. I don't know.
Yeah, and he said he's doing an apologetics show for their subscribers
praise the Lord.
to their thing. And so my thing is, if you're going to present yourself as being more theologically informed than the average fella, because you're going to get into, if they're going to get into it as much as he just did, then he should be able to go further, but didn't. So B-.
Okay. Jim Amberg says, casual observation, the difference between this and the Trinity Seminary channel. By the way, we'd love for you to go and subscribe to the Trinity Seminary channel, trinitysem.edu. Search that in the YouTube search bar and you'll find it. The difference between this and the Trinity Seminary channel is that you guys follow fewer rabbit trails there and also wear suit jackets.
Yes to the first part, but you just showed that you have not been a long-time viewer of Channel Angel, because if you go back and watch our back catalog, we used to wear sports coats.
It doesn't make what he said untrue.
No, but we did used to wear sports coats in every video, and I was not for changing that. But the truth is, I wore a sports coat because I used to be fat and it covered my gut.
Caleb Sowers says 50 people in chat, but only 11 likes. Come on, guys. I agree. Every time that guy, I usually agree with him. All right, let's go to the next one. This is Matt Walsh.
Fox News host Tucker Carlson reacted on Thursday evening to the arrest of a Canadian minister who protested a drag queen event for children. Derek Reimer of Mission 7 was arrested after he protested a drag queen story hour at Calgary Public Library on Saturday. Video shows him shoved to the ground by attendees as he proclaimed that Jesus Christ is Lord and quoted biblical passages about homosexuality. This is what they're doing in Canada now. They're arresting people for that. Carlson also referenced professional Christians who have frequently remained silent on governmental overreach and widespread disregard for biblical sexual ethics. Carlson said, where is David French, Beth Moore, Tim Keller? All these people who are defending Christianity as actual Christians are being arrested for being Christian. Not a word. I'm glad that you brought this up because this is specifically on the issue of the sexualization of children, the drag queen events, transgenderism, gender ideology. And I have often had the same question as Tucker Carlson, which is all of these self-professed Christian leaders, where are they on this issue? I get this question a lot in Q&As and we're going around giving speeches, and I hear this question from people. Like, where's the church on this issue? Why aren't they saying anything? The actual leaders of churches. That's a very good question. And I think that this, when it comes to a litmus test for a self-professed, self-appointed Christian leader, you couldn't ask for a better one than this issue in particular, on the gender issue. Because what we get from a lot of these people, David French is one of them. If they're going to wade in to this topic, it's to do the tone policing thing. It's to say, well, there are excesses on that side, people that are pushing. There are excesses, sure, but we have to be good Christians. We have to be nice and compassionate. What you don't hear them ever do is actually take on the ideology itself, which tells you everything you need to know about them.
So we have Matt Walsh echoing, was it Tucker Carlson, about David French and Beth Moore and I guess Russell Moore and these Christians that are popular evangelicals, and they're not speaking out I remember Russell Moore getting a lot of flack on Twitter when he didn't say anything about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And I see David French. I don't know much about him, but I see a lot of his tweets, and I don't follow him, but I see a lot of his tweets, and I see a lot of people, a lot of Christians interacting with it. A lot of the Christians in our channel that I follow, for example, interacting with David French. And I see David French always trying to, like, it's my same problem that I gave with the example when I talked about the urban apologists, how they always punch in one direction, and it seems like David French is one of those people that only punches in one direction. He says he's a conservative, but he's always punching right, and I think that that's weak. So what do you think about that, the idea of Christian leaders? Because I guess it depends on the leader. Because I think you'll hear Al Mohler.
I think if something's a big cultural issue, big enough that it's captivating the nation, and you're a Christian leader in some meaningful sense of that word, you ought to have kind of made it clear, or off, unless you don't know. And if you don't know about some of these type of issues,
like the gender issue, biblical sexuality.
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, I don't have a problem saying I think that I think that the transitioning of kids is horrific. I think people know what I think about abortion. You've been clear about all of these things.
Yeah.
I don't care if I don't want to buzz market for these companies that have done this, want to take on Dylan Mulvaney as some sort of a mascot. We have a mascot here on Trinity Radio, and his name is Pritchett Prime, and he's sitting in front of that blue TV screen over there. So no, we're not down with that sort of stuff, but the reality is we do love those people. But I agree with Walsh about this. Now, whether or not any particular person thinks that Walsh does this consistently or does this right or is too mean or whatever else.
Yeah, didn't he get in trouble for being too mean by a lot of people? Here recently.
Yeah, and so like, there's a discussion to be had there. I grant that, but I will say this is being a Christian does not always mean just being nice.
Yeah,
nice is that doesn't. That doesn't
listen
help.
to Bono. Jesus wasn't even nice all the time.
That's right. Why did sepulchres full of dead men's bones?
Yeah.
Right. You listen. To be a Christian means to love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself, and do it. And at minimum, believe what Jesus believed as best you can, and do what Jesus did. It has to be what it means to be a Christian, is to try and be like Jesus in the ways that you're supposed to be like Jesus. Right. Have to qualify everything around here, but that's the truth. But that may mean the most loving thing to someone may be telling them something that they don't want to hear, and is shocking to them. Like we talk about.
So, okay, well, hang on. Shocking.
Hold on. This is like the hell thing. We were just talking about hell, but I think that these two issues, sexuality, sexual ethics, and things like that, and the hell thing, are two things that, trust me, as a guy who has looked at thousands at this point of videos and TikToks, looking at why people say they walked away from Christianity, those two come close to the top of the list.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to something like the gender and the sexual stuff, the most loving thing to do might be to tell them, when I spoke on hell, this is what I was going to say, is the separate issue, obviously. But when someone, I gave this example, like, well, yeah, but you have all this religious trauma from people growing up and hearing about judgment and all of that sort of thing. Even if they didn't hear the eternal conscious torment thing, they grow up with this fear of judgment and God's upset with me and all of these kind of things about this. Well, the truth about it is, with hell, and with the sexual ethics thing, I've completely lost my train of thought because I saw you looking at your phone and it distracted me.
Sorry.
Oh, I know what it is. People say religious trauma and all that sort of thing. But look, if you go to, as I said before, if a person is, and I'm not comparing smoking to anything, we're talking about hell here. But if a man is a smoker and he goes to his doctor and his doctor finds out, oh, he's got like stage 4 lung cancer. I don't know if I'm using the medical terminology right, but really bad lung cancer.
My dad died of stage 4 lung cancer.
Stage 4 lung cancer. Or maybe it's not stage 4. What's one where they could still do something about it? Maybe they could. Yeah. I know that lung cancer is particularly rough, but let's just say there's one they could do something about. It's going to be hard to tell this guy this. It's going to be traumatic for him to hear this now that he can't, he doesn't, this, that he's got cancer, it's going to kill him, that he doesn't need to smoke, they may have to do some surgery or something, or some horrific treatment. That would be a horrific thing and traumatic for him and terrible. But if it's true, he needs to know. And the same is true about hell. Right. If it's true, you need to know. And we need to, and the most loving thing for the doctor to do would be to tell him. And the most loving thing for a Christian to do would be to preach the good news. And so with the gender type stuff too, if this is not healthy, whether you affirm Christianity or not, then it is the loving thing, not healthy, not good for society, not good for the person, whatever it is, whatever thing that's wrong with it, the loving thing is to tell them.
Fine. Grant all of that. Now, how do you tell them? That's what everyone wants to know, because you say that's shocking, that's traumatic on the gender issue. Great. How do you break the news of cancer or the truth about the gender issue to someone? That's what people want to know. And does Matt Walsh do it right?
I think these guys would say it like, and I don't think, well, okay, there's truth in this hyperbolic statement.
Yeah.
For many people, well, this isn't hyperbolic if I qualify it with many people. For many people, it wouldn't matter. If you are opposed, that's the primary.
Right, because I was kind of sympathetic.
But it should matter to us. How we react,
because I'm an old grumpy man. I get that. So I was more sympathetic towards Matt Walsh when people piled on him for how he treated the one transgender person, Dylan, whoever it was. But I agree with you that you and I have talked about this publicly, and we've never been that, I guess, blunt. And if you want us to call it rude or mean-spirited, fine.
Which part? What he said about Dylan?
Yeah. But you and I get accused of we're transphobe, hateful, bigots, no matter what you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a part of you that says, well, if you're going to get called that anyway, might as well take a few heads off. But
why? Where does that come from?
Right. But the other part of me...
Take a few heads off.
Like go all...
No, I know what you mean.
Matt
like
Walsh.
Shut them down with rhetoric.
Yeah.
Like that. If they're going to call me this, I'm just going to go ahead and say everything that I want to say about this. This,
But you and I don't do that because like we temper that desire sometimes to just take a few heads off with the fact that we still have to, even there are people who are going to hate you no matter what, but there are people who won't. And so you've got to be, I think, measured and sober-minded about it and not just fly off the handle. But I can think of 2 instances at 2 different churches where you and I have been called to the principal's office, so to speak, over how we address this issue that which was as kid-gloved as possible, and still was like, I don't know, that was a little bit too far. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that will happen.
So it's just like no matter, you can't win.
I told one pastor, pastor, and you were in the room.
Yeah.
I told one pastor, I said, I said, I don't have to talk about this subject.
Yeah.
But if I am to talk about this subject, I cannot say less than this.
Right.
Okay. If you ask me to say less than this, I feel like I'm balking on my convictions.
Right. And so I understand that there might be a hesitancy of Christian leaders to speak out about this because they don't know how to navigate those waters. Mm-hmm. And even you were called, what? You were the nicest bigot, but you were still called a bigot.
Nicest, most loving bigot they ever saw.
Right. When you were talking, what were you talking about?
Homosexuality.
Yeah, right. And they said, but you were still a bigot. And so I understand that some people may have a difficulty trying to navigate how they go to speak about this, because no matter what you do, there are going to be the loudest voices and those who disagree with you who are going to shout you down and call you a bigot. And the temptation is to do, Matt Walsh or beyond Matt Walsh in response to it. And I think that you probably need to, at least if you're in ministry, if you're a pastor, you don't need to be up there doing what Matt Walsh does. But I don't have a problem with what Matt Walsh does, if I'm being honest with you. I would have a problem with me doing it, but I don't mind that somebody is doing it. I get is that fair to say?
You can say whatever you want.
But just, I mean, is that reason? I'm saying, should I be against if it's not right for me? It's not.
I'll tell
right
you this
for
right now. Yeah. I'll just say this right now. I don't care what you say about it. The fact is that there is a lot we could say about each of these commentators, and obviously Christians aren't going to agree with Christians on everything and all that sort of thing. The thing that I think one could highlight that has happened as a result of Walsh in terms of like actually doing something is what happened with Vanderbilt Medical Center, and anywhere where what they have done, and this has been primarily in Tennessee, has affected whether children have access to some of these affirmation things.
Certainly, and I understand a take no prisoners attitude when you're mutilating kids, for sure. And so when you're under that kind of thing, then absolutely, I mean, your condemnation should be as strong as possible. But his strongest condemnations about that thing went against a particular person on TikTok, not necessarily that issue. Or at least what he got in trouble for, right? So I think
Walsh got in trouble.
Yeah, for how he responded to Dylan, but that wasn't this. I mean, the issue that he's addressing is bound up into that. But I'm just saying, I think your condemnation, you can be as strong as Matt Walsh is on the issue itself, but you don't necessarily have to target a specific individual, even if that individual represents that whole thing that you're trying to take down. I think that might be some helpful advice to pastors who want to speak out on this. It's the issue.
We're going to go
necessarily need to. You don't need
talk
to
about the person, right?
Target.
Well, we're going to go to another video, but first, I find it interesting that are these conservatives mostly right? Yes or no? We have the poll going, and for a while it was 50-50. This may be the most divided poll we've ever done. And currently, there have been 40 votes, and 47% say yes, these conservatives are mostly right, and the no is 52%.
Well, yeah. Well, I actually agree with Matt Walsh that I think that the specific people he pointed out, they need to make some concrete statements of where they are on this position, because from what I've seen on just Twitter, it's just a bunch of meandering around it and then whining about conservatives when they claim to be conservatives. And I'm like, okay, but that's fine. But you also, from what I understand, y'all are self-professed Christian leaders in the evangelical circles. I know that David French and Russell Moore are doing his politics for Christians thing. You have to speak clearly on
I think
issues.
The transitioning kids thing and abortion are two topics that he's right. These are good test things. Like, I don't like the way that sounds exactly. I don't know
test cases.
I don't know exactly what I would mean by that. These are two topics where a pastor should be able to just tell you what he thinks about this.
Right.
And if he can't, I'm confused and I've got problems.
Yeah. And you should be called out for it, I think.
Here we've got good question. If Jesus shed his divinity, my wisdom is as good as his. Well, that's not even necessarily true. But if he was fully God all the time, he blundered, suggesting to disregard cleanliness. Pritchett, what do you think this is trying? It's saying, look, if Jesus shed his divinity. Okay, so is this someone saying we don't have to care about Jesus? Basically, if Jesus shed his divinity, basically, I'm as wise as he is.
That's not necessarily true.
That's what
on
I said.
The face of it.
If he was fully God all the time, he blundered, suggesting
they disregard
cleanliness.
Well, the one instance I could think of where he disregarded
the washing of hands.
Was more of a Pharisaical thing than it was a Torah thing.
So if he was fully God all the time, so is this person trying to talk? I'm not trying to misunderstand you. Good question. I'm trying to understand. Well, I am trying to understand, and it sounds like you're a modalist or something, and saying, look, Jesus. I don't know. Well, maybe you want to clarify that.
Yeah,
but thank you for the super chat.
Yeah.
All right,
I don't think he blundered.
Next thing here, Knowles, Michael Knowles.
Hi, Michael. Arun here with a religious question. You had previously advised us not to explicitly lie to others about our COVID-19 vaccination status, and I'm guessing that this advice is born out of your belief as a Christian that it is unjustifiable to deliberately lie. Now, I've mulled over this advice a fair bit because in the Hindu tradition, we are taught not to waste our scruples on those who are unworthy of them. This comes from a vignette in the Mahabharata in which a hero is engaged in single combat with a villain, and when the villain's chariot gets stuck in the mud, the rules of combat dictate that he must wait for the other person to free himself, but Sri Krishna, God incarnate, tells the hero not to obey these rules because the villain has stood by evil his entire life and is deserving of death. I do think it is dishonorable for someone to ask for my COVID-19 vaccination status. So I'm wondering if you think that in such a case, it would be right for someone to lie. And I wonder if you as a Christian could perhaps tell me how you might view this based on the example from the book of Joshua, in which Rahab hides 2 spies sent by Joshua and even lies explicitly to the king of Jericho about their whereabouts. Would this not be an example of a case in which it is right to lie for a greater good? Thank you, as always, for your thoughts.
As always, a fabulous question from Arun. Really, really good question. We're close up on the member block, so I'll try to give this as a pithy answer, and then maybe we can talk about it a little bit more in the member block. a good example from Rahab in the Bible, and an example so striking because it's so out of line with the rest of the Bible and the way that lying per se is treated, that it's merited lots of commentary over the years. I think St. Augustine said that what Rahab did was wrong when she lied. It was wrong. She committed an evil action, but God forgave that action simultaneous with it, and in consideration of the good that also came from that action. There have been lots of Bible commentaries on this. One way that it could have happened, though, and one way that one can kind of work around these issues, let's say, the Nazis show up and you're hiding a Jew in your basement. What do you say? He's in my basement. Would be through something called mental reservation, which is you could say, the Nazis come up, they say, is there a Jew here? And you say, there was a Jew here, but he's not here anymore. Are you lying? Well, it depends. You're using somewhat ambiguous language, because by here, you could mean the room that you're standing in. And the Jew may have been in that room, but the Jew is no longer there. The Jew is now in the basement. Have you lied exactly? Not quite sure. That would be one option on mental reservation. But I would still have to stop short of this line that we should not waste our scruples on people who are not worthy of them. You do not owe a perfectly precise answer to people who do not have any right to that knowledge that they are requesting. That is true. But it nevertheless is wrong to tell a lie. It is always wrong to tell a lie, and the morality of the action of telling a lie is determined by the action itself, not by a consequence of that action. That would be, if we were to fall into a kind of consequentialist view of things, that would be taking it too far. And that's the truth.
No.
Wow.
So a lie is the malicious intent to deceive. If somebody is knocking on, if the Gestapo or whoever is knocking on your door, if stormtroopers are coming through, is there a Jew in your basement? The answer is no.
Yeah, you just say no.
Yeah. Because you're not.
I think people could be shocked to hear us say that, although they shouldn't be.
There's no malicious intent to deceive. There's an honorable intent to deceive. And thinking about Rahab, I mean, go to James 2:25. In the same way, wasn't Rahab the prostitute also justified by works?
Yeah, but what
in
people
receiving
say
the
is,
messengers and sending them out by a different route. So it seems to me that God was okay with there was no malice there, and that it was an honorable act of protection. And so I want to say that there are circumstances where you can say something that is false for good reasons, and I wouldn't classify that as a lie, because I would understand a lie to be a malicious intent to deceive.
Okay, then that's a way to attack this. Now now initially the guy was asking, is it okay for me to lie about my COVID vaccination status?
Yeah.
No. Now, there's two general ways that I've seen Christians approach this. One, it's never okay to lie.
Yeah.
And two, it's sometimes okay to lie.
Yeah. On
the never okay to lie situation, the way we will see this handled, and we saw Michael Knowles, I wrote this down as a note before I even saw that. But the way Michael Knowles handled it, or at least a possibility he gave, is be selective about the information that you do share, right? Be selective about that. Like, you can tell some of something, you don't have to tell the whole truth. So if
find a word game to play that would not.
Well, yeah, I don't like the word.
But you were like,
well,
no.
we're not here like in this square foot that I'm standing on. Come on.
Yeah.
It's not a malicious intent to deceive, but I don't
think you have to go that far. I think you can say something that's false if you're not if it's not out of malice. But
well, in 1 Samuel 16, why is that in my way? In 1 Samuel 16, Samuel is going to go up to Bethlehem to anoint David king, right? But Saul's still king, and so he has to come up with some. He's going to go up there to do this, but he's asking, well, what happens if? How long? What's going to happen? Where does it start? What happens if?
Back at the beginning.
If somebody asks me why I'm going up there, because I don't want the king to find out about this. So verse 1 of chapter 16, 1 Samuel. Now the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you grieve over Saul, since I have rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have selected a king for myself among his sons. Of course, we all know that's David. But Samuel said, how can I go? When Saul hears of it, he'll kill me. And the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. You shall invite Jesse to the sacrifice. I'll show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I designate to you. So Samuel did what the Lord said and came to Bethlehem, and the elders of the city came trembling to meet him and said, do you come in peace? He said, in peace, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourself and come with me to the sacrifice. He also consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to sacrifice. So he did what God said. What God told him to do is to now understand the situation here. Go up here and anoint Jesse's son king. I'll tell you which one it is. But the king's somebody might ask, I can't have the king fight. He'll kill me. Well, okay, we'll tell him, go get a heifer. And if anybody asks you, say, I'm going up there to make a sacrifice. Now, there is nothing directly untrue in any of that, given that he does what God says and is going to go make a sacrifice. But it doesn't seem to be the principal reason he was going up there. And so it does seem to be an attempt to deceive. So while there is no outright untruth here, there is a deception by being selective about what info you share. A modern example of this might be someone is doing business in a country where you can't pass out Bibles and stuff like that. And so they're in Iran or somewhere and they're doing business, but they're also a missionary. This is how the International Mission Board planned to operate, maybe did operate or does operate. And for a while, and if someone asks you what you're up to, oh, I'm doing business. I'm a purchaser for this plastics company, and I'm coming in here to buy product to make our materials to make our product out of. Right? All right, see ya. I got no problem with that. Right?
So the difference between that and a word game is you're giving yourself an additional true reason to not have to say the real reason. Whereas you're not having to, that's different than saying, well, not here, because technically not standing 3 feet away.
Right, but I'm just saying this is what the never okay to lie people will say.
Yeah.
It's okay to give selective information. And with people like Rahab, what they'll say is of course, with Rahab, what people will say is we have a building of revelation to where, the revelation wasn't specific enough as we would get with more revelation, written revelation, and New Testament scripture and all that. So he meets people where they are, and she had good intentions, but ultimately our God's a God of truth, and of course he doesn't want that lie. That's how the never okay people might address the Rahab people, Rahab thing. And then you have the sometimes okay people, and there's no Jews in my house.
Kind of what kind of.
What?
The sometimes okay people when they get the question, do I look fat in this dress? Or I mean, the answer is always no, because it's never the dress's fault. But
we know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
What should you say is a different question.
But the issue I have though, back to the I don't think all of that's necessary, because if you understand the intent. I mean, you could look for all kinds of technicalities. Well, Rahab probably didn't even know if they took her the route she suggested, for example. So how could she possibly know? But she intentionally said this way, So it's like, I don't know. I think that it's easier to say that the intent of your heart, because a lie is the malicious intent to deceive. There's no malice there. There's the honorable intent.
Well, here's an example that Derek gives to us. And this is, he talks about Abraham told the truth to the king of Egypt, but was still rebuked for it. Abimelech, he tells him to say, you're my sister. Yeah. I think this is what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Say you're my sister, he says to Sarai or Sarah. And she was his half sister. So it's like a half lie. And he's saying, but still he was rebuked for this, even though he didn't.
Right, because of the intent.
Well,
the intent to deceive, a malicious intent to deceive, really to save. That's what I keep trying to tell people. So,
okay, look here. Is there such a thing as righteous deception?
Yeah.
But if you're with the never okay to lie people, you might say what Kelvin Cuello says here, which is, I think there's sometimes excessive honesty. Like you don't have to tell everything you know.
Right.
Okay. Well, I think we've dealt with that one. What? You ready to move on to another one? Well, first of all, I had a question from Honestly Atheist.
Yeah, I think he needs to rethink that.
Who? Honestly Atheist?
No. What's Knowles?
Oh, yeah. Granted, Christians are not obligated to be perpetually nice. Are they called to not be mean-spirited or hateful, also prideful, vain? Well, they are. Yeah. We're called not to be hateful, proud, all those kind of things. But I definitely think there's such a thing as boldness, and you know,
mean-spirited is the wrong thing, because mean-spirited anyone can that's in the interpreter's head. Because if I don't mean to sound mean-spirited, but somebody accuses me of being mean-spirited, well, whose problem is that?
Well, we cut all through all that with honestly atheists. Do you intend to be that?
Right.
Okay, this is a Bible, if you've never seen one before. And
well, most people have them on their phones, Braxton. Get with the times.
It describes itself in the New Testament as a sword, which is an offensive weapon. So I do believe that even if you try to be nice, like I think we do, and you're sharing the stuff, eventually it may end up upsetting someone when you're waving an offensive weapon around like a Bible. But of course, there are those people that seem like that you see on the TV sometimes, some preachers, seems like they got up in the morning and decided, who can I tick off with the word of God? Now that is not, I mean, you shouldn't be trying to do that, but be bold when confronted with wickedness. That's fine. So you may not always be nice, but you shouldn't be looking to be a jerk either. Right. Okay. Trinity Radio. I think a good question is, are the dudes more interested in winning the war or winning skirmish? Because at this point they aren't going to win the war because they are losing people. And what's the next one, Pritchett? Crowder?
Well,
again? Question for Gerald. I'm really looking forward to your theology show. How do you identify theologically? And if there is time, what about the rest of the crew?
I bristle at the how do you identify theologically? I'm like, so
it's trans Methodist.
It's trans. Can't do that. No, I'm non-denominational. I'm a Bible-believing Christian. I think that a lot of times what we do with maybe good intentions, both in Catholicism originally and in Protestant movement after that, was try to put some structure around something so that people can access it a little bit more easily and have some kind of feel for it. Like as human beings, we desire structure, but what we did is we started to realize that structure was getting away from us, and we had to go back to something that was a little more decentralized. The structure should really be the Bible and Christ as the head of our church, right? Not necessarily some kind of a group or organization. Not that all of them are bad. You can see some of the excesses in some of the Protestant churches that are now preaching, prosperity gospels, or not touching any issue at all that has any kind of consequence, or going after, these charismatic movements for this, healing for the sake of healing, or speaking in tongues for no reason in church, and not going by what the Bible says. So I try to stay away from all of that and just say, what does Scripture say? What is Christ trying to communicate to the body of believers, and follow that. And if people are preaching that, I don't really care what denomination they are. I'm not going to follow necessarily if you're Baptist and they say don't drink, because I'm like, Jesus, he made wine and his disciples.
It was
drank.
grape juice, you son of a bitch.
It was not based on the time of year that the wedding was, and based on when the harvest is. It could not possibly have still been grape juice.
Well, also the fact that
natural fermentation.
God and Jesus don't be prone to drunkenness, which I don't think happens with Welch's.
That's exactly right. So anyway, that's my brand of theology, and it's kind of colored by a lot of different people that use for commentary background. But I just don't like these denominational boxes that people get put into. And that if you're in one and it's fantastic and it's working for you, that's great. But are they putting more on you? Are they yoking you with more than Christ yoked you with? Because if he didn't yoke you with, don't wear, you have to wear dresses to church, or that you can't play this music, or that you can't say these things.
Yeah.
So don't let that happen.
But I like a good maxi dress.
All of us are trying to get closer to the truth.
Yeah.
And no matter who you are. And I think a good question to ask atheists, I always ask them, who do you think got it more right? Who is closer to the truer way to live, therefore closer to something called the truth, at least in terms of this universe and what works in this universe? Julius Caesar or Jesus Christ? Just ask them that question and then ask them why. And if they say Steven Crowder, that's the right answer.
Okay, well, aside from whatever that guy at the end was trying to convey,
well, there are a good number of atheists who will tell you that, Christianity has done a lot of good in the world, and if you follow Christian values, even if you don't believe it,
was there some? But
you can't go wrong. I mean,
it's a fine way to live.
Yeah.
But here's the.
So that's how a lot of atheists would answer that. Be like, yeah, but so what?
Was there something there I was supposed to disagree with?
Well,
maybe I wasn't listening.
I can't stand the "I'm a biblicist" type of response.
Oh, like denomination should go out the window type.
Well, no, I just believe the Bible. When people say that, especially when they claim to be, I mean, this guy again says he's going to have, he's going to have the apologetics thing. Well, what do you believe about things? Don't give me this. I mean, non-denominational, we're non-denominational, but we still tell people what we believe on theological issues. And the I'm a biblicist thing, like when you're arguing with people like about theology, that's such a corny thing.
The first time
I
ever heard this, something like
where
this,
everyone tries to be a biblicist. So
my youth pastor, J.D. Davis, was taking us all to this lock-in at this other church in Jolton, Tennessee. And we went there. There's all kinds of kids there, maybe the biggest lock-in type thing ever. On the way home, we were all like in the spirit kind of thing. And I was sitting in the van next to this kid from another church, but he and I had kind of been talking a little bit. And I looked over at him and I said, "Oh, hey, what denomination are you?" And he said, "I'm a Christian." And I said, "Yeah, but what kind of Christian?" "A Christian." And I remember at that time, I'd never heard anything like that before. And I sat back in my seat and I thought, why didn't he just answer my question? You know, it's like, what's the big deal? Like this air of like enlightened thinking, because you can't tell me the theological issues that you hold.
Well, one of our good friends just put out a statement saying, well, my denominational thing is going to be a personal business from now on.
Who's, oh, you don't want to say.
Well, Cameron. Yeah, he tweeted that.
He tweeted what?
That he's going to keep his, people wondering if he's still going to get confirmed. And then he said, well, if you're still wondering, I'm not going to answer because I'm going to keep my denominational family stuff private from now on. And he said that.
From now on?
Yeah, he said that
We've all been watching the whole thing.
He said that's on him, that he dragged it. He said he recognized that, Braxton.
That was like the most public.
Right. And then now he says just caused too much problems.
Okay.
So.
Cameron can do whatever he wants in that regard.
Well, that's, I, again, can't see why anyone cares, but at the same time, but Cameron does state what he believes about different theological issues, which I think is different than what church he belongs to.
Sure.
But but my problem is not even, because like I said, we're non-denominational, so that could mean anything.
Yeah.
But this idea of, well, I just believe the Bible. Well, oneness Pentecostals think that they just believe the Bible, right? So that's going to be an insufficient answer if you're wanting people to listen to you like he wants people to listen to. Like, I have the bare minimum threshold. Apostles' Creed, okay, good, right? Nicene Creed, okay, good. Constantinople, good. Ephesus, good, right? So, I mean, my thing is pretty low, but still, when someone asks you what you think about theologically, and you just say, well, I'm non-denominational Bible believing, and then in the earlier clip, because I'm a detective in my part-time, and I can't say this, I know for sure, but my bet is that they're Calvinists too.
I just
because if they're having Driscoll on and they're well, I just believe the Bible.
Well, I just don't understand why
I don't like hearing that. It seems, I bet you they're Calvinists.
You can't like
we drink.
Why can't people just like, if you were a Calvinist, Pritchett, and I was not, what would be the problem? Like, let's say you just couldn't handle going to the church I went to for whatever reason because of that position.
Yeah.
What would be the problem with saying, okay, we'll go to the Presbyterian church. There's one on Washington Avenue, and you go there and then we'll meet for lunch. What's the big deal? What's the big deal?
Right. There is no big deal. Well, you're a complementarian. I'm an egalitarian, and we do a show together.
Yeah. I don't
but yeah, I think that if you're going to talk about this kind of thing, then you need to at least give a more clear answer than.
Well, what if they make it sound more complex? Like Derek says here, it's kind of like when Hank Hanegraaff labeled his brand of preterism exegetical eschatology.
I'm a biblicist. That's the same. I'm an exegetical soteriologist. I mean, everyone can say that. When anyone can say that, you've said nothing. That's my problem with that.
Yeah, but Mateo Oninist may be right. Maybe that kid I was sitting next to just didn't know what the word denomination meant. When I was first, he's like, I didn't know what it was.
Couldn't spell it. It's a big word. Who cares? Right.
Okay. Next is Walsh again. 2 more clips here. Walsh first.
Now I will say that the one, open border stuff and all the rest of it, that's one thing. But the message in the one ad we played about, hey, we should all get along and love our enemies. Like that is, it's benign. I mean, there's nothing offensive about it unless you're AOC. There's nothing offensive or outrageous about it. But I do think that this kind of message, and I get sometimes this is what Christians like to lead with because it's the most crowd pleasing. Love your enemy, love everybody, get along, okay. But it's not a very useful message. You can say love your enemy, and that's scriptural, it's true. But you should be saying something useful about that. Like, it's not enough to just say, well, love your enemy. What does that mean exactly? What do you mean you should love our enemies? Does that mean we have to get along with them all the time and always be smiling and cheerful and we can never disagree? They showed a lot of clips of people screaming at each other. And like I said, in many of those, we don't know the context for those clips, but in many of them, it seemed like these were demonstrations where the 2 sides yelling at each other. Are we sure that both sides were being hateful? Some of those clips might be people who are standing for the truth and standing for what they believe in and standing up to those who represent evil. So that's not hatred. There's nothing wrong with that. Just because someone is yelling and angry doesn't automatically make them hateful. And by the way, even if they're being hateful, that's not necessarily wrong because there are things in the world that we should hate. There are things that God hates. Evil and sin are those things. We should hate evil. We should hate sin. I don't know if any of those clips are from any demonstrations outside of a drag queen story hour, for example, but those are the kinds of demonstrations that sometimes get a little heated. The people that are protesting the drag queen story hours or the so-called family-friendly drag shows, are they hateful? Yeah, in a certain sense, because they hate the sexualization and grooming of children. They are hateful towards that act, and they should be. So yes, we should love our enemies. We should have love, but that means standing for what is right, standing for what's true. It means wanting the best for people, but wanting the best for someone also means not going along with those things that are destroying them. And that has to be part of the message. If it's not, then I'm not sure what we achieve.
Okay, before we respond to this, let me just say that Derek did put up here this. Did Braxton really miss my super chat, but read my comment immediately after? Derek, there are new rules coming now, and the new rules coming down the pike apparently are, if you make a super chat, you have purchased the certainty, well, the extreme likelihood that I will read and we'll talk about your comment. But the payment might not necessarily be for the comment that you attach to the payment. Could be any comment that you've made.
And you're making this up right now.
I'm making up as we go. That's how the best rules get started. But he says, going off of what Gerald said, I find myself becoming more and more anti-creedal, like some Baptists. What are your thoughts on creedalism? Let's just tackle that real quick before we go back to Walsh. Pritchett,
I have
you're
no
my
problem.
go-to for stuff like
I have no problem with creedalism. I give my 3 creeds.
The Bible has creeds.
Yeah, the Bible itself has creeds. But the no creed, but the Bible is also a creed. Everyone says that. But yeah, the Apostles' Creed's great. The Athanasian Creed's great. The Nicene Creed's great. What's wrong with what's?
Okay.
I mean,
now what did Walsh say that? What's the deal here? He's just rehashing the point we made.
There was a He Gets Us commercial. I think he was responding
during the
to that.
Super Bowl, the Jesus commercial.
And you know, there was people screaming and stuff, and he was complaining that a lot of people go straight to the statement, love your enemies, but doesn't ever say anything about it. And what I want to say is, going back to, let's do some hermeneutic stuff briefly. Mm-hmm. Okay, so love in our context, right, can be applied to anything from your parents to your spouse to pizza and your dogs and Takis for me. I love Takis, right? So
that's what?
In our context. Love can be...
You love all that stuff. I love you too.
Right. But we're when it comes to Scripture, we're low context readers, right? We don't have all of the necessary background information.
I didn't grow up there.
Cultural, yeah, right. But they were high context. So love your enemies when Jesus says it in the context of Roman rule over Israel, and you've got a hotbed of zealotry out there in Galilee with the Maccabees, you know, in recent memory, all of this, right? And eschatological expectation for something to happen, some kind of deliverance or big event or whatever. And you've got all of that going on. It's in that context that Jesus said, love your enemies, right? So when you just say, I am somewhat sympathetic to what Matt says here, because when you just say love your enemies, in our context, taking that statement of Jesus out of its, you know, that context into a context where we use that language for anything from puppies to Skittles to whatever, I do think that is important. I mean, you can get a general message by just saying love your enemies. He's right, that is a crowd pleaser, but there has to be something else to that, because you can get heated with somebody without even being mean, but just heated and bold and even heated arguments with someone, and it's still, like you said earlier in the podcast, that can be done in an act of love, even if the person doesn't want to hear what you're saying. Mm-hmm. So
doesn't like the way you're saying it. But I mean, as someone who has heard it's not what you say, it's the way you said it for my entire life. And never listened to it.
No, no, I have. Sometimes, hey, I've apologized on this channel for going a little bit too far.
You have. I was just kidding. I didn't mean to actually
sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong. And that requires wisdom to know when someone thinks that you're actually, you know, it's the way you're saying that, man, is wrong. And if it is, it takes wisdom to recognize it. But it also takes wisdom to recognize, no, you're just sore about it. You just don't like it. So that's what you can say, because you're not saying anything about the content of what I said, right? So you're just going to ad hominem. You're meanie. Okay, well, that's a way that you're trying to get out of this. You just have to have wisdom to know which is which. But I do think that he's kind of right that not every time you're amped up about an issue, and we've pounded the tables in here about abortion, about stuff in the past. So I mean, we do get amped up, but that doesn't mean, that means we're not being loving. In fact,
that could be the loving thing to do.
So this, I think, is probably the smartest thing he said compared to his previous thing. But
so who's up next? Knowles?
Yeah. So I'm okay.
Mr. Knowles, I have an awkward question for you about masturbation of all things.
Whoa. Well, with that teaser, what were you going to say?
I say, so I'm actually okay with this response. You never said what you think of it.
I thought it was a rehash to a certain degree of what we said earlier about nice doesn't always mean, all that stuff, right?
Right.
Okay.
So now,
wait, real quick before we go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary in Evansville, Indiana wants you as a student. Don't go away. We got more clips. We got more to talk about, and the best is yet to come, at least the most provocative.
Right.
But we would love, if you would like to learn and earn your degree in Bible college and seminary with the setup you're experiencing right now, whether that's you're driving down the road and you're listening on a phone that's plugged into your speaker. Don't look at the screen. Control yourself. Pritchett looks good today, but not good enough for you to hurt yourself over. And whether you're sitting in front of a desk at work when you should be working, or at home when you should be doing that honey-do list, or whatever it is that you're doing Trinity Radio instead of, you could learn from Trinity Seminary using that same setup, because all of our courses are recorded. You can watch them over and over again on double speed, even just like you do, because we're theology geeks and we know how theology geeks function. So check that out at trinitysem.edu. By the way, there's an hour and a half long Leighton Flowers discussion, not on Calvinism, but on systematic theology that you've never heard before unless you're a Trinity student. And also from Tim Stratton on apologetics, from Pritchett on Romans 3:15, all kinds of stuff. So no, 1 Peter 3:15. Sorry, I look at you and I think Romans. All right, so let's move on here and get to the next clip. I see there's some super chats. We will get to those in just a second.
Mr. Knowles, I have an awkward question for you about masturbation of all things. I'm a married man in my 30s. I have a child, and I just have to know, is masturbation without porn a sin? I feel very ashamed when I succumb to the natural urge to masturbate, and I don't know if that is because I've grown up thinking it was sinful, and I psychologically am wired to feel that way, or if it truly is wrong. Of course, so much of the internet tells me to just have at it and be guilt-free, but I don't know how to not have guilt, and I get jealous of those that say they have no guilt. So a sincere thank you for any wisdom on this matter.
Yes, it's wrong and you shouldn't do it. You feel guilt because that's your moral conscience. The people who say that they don't have guilt have, one, dulled their moral conscience, and two, are lying to themselves. And the way you know they're lying to themselves is because of a great bit of wisdom from that political philosopher Norm Macdonald, who said, when you're going into your room to do that thing, with yourself, and what do? Do you open up the window shades really wide open? And you say, hey, everybody. No, you don't. You close the blinds. You close the window shades. And you feel ashamed. People don't talk about that sort of thing openly, and because it's degrading. It's very, very degrading, and it's obviously not what your body was built for and your sexuality was built for. Things have a purpose. The purpose of this glass, not quite as good as a leftist tears tumbler, but the purpose of it is actually to drink wine, though I'm not a lush quite that much. I'm drinking coffee in the morning. The purpose of the paper is for me to read the show. The purpose of my watch is to tell time. The purpose of the sweater is to keep me warm. The purpose of my eyes is to see. The purpose of my mouth is to eat and to taste. And the purpose of some of those other parts, like the ones that Dennis Prager was talking about earlier, the purpose of that is for a woman, not for yourself. So yeah, that's wrong. How do you resist that? Obviously, sex is a huge driver for men in particular. You're married, so I would encourage you to have a conversation with your wife and maybe say, hey, look, I'm I am so drawn to you that we need to express that a little bit more for the generation and education of children and for the unity of the spouses, and so that I don't fall into this sin, which is obviously a sin.
Okay, Pritchett,
that is
your pick. So
that is the it is always wrong answer.
Yeah. Now, well, yeah, that is what he said. I agree with the sentiment of what he said.
Yeah.
Okay. I just think that, as with Crowder at the beginning of the show, that that's not all we can say about it. There's a little bit more we can say.
Yeah. Well, the marriage bed is undefiled, and if someone were to ask me, is masturbation a sin if you're thinking about your spouse? I would probably say no.
Wait, what? If what was?
If is it a sin to masturbate thinking about your spouse? You know, because that's not using porn, but it's just using mental images from prior sexual encounters or whatever. You know,
it was said to me when I was about 13, 14 years old and asked this question.
Yeah.
And it was said to me, don't you think that, like, let's say your spouse was in the hospital for a little while. Don't you think that she would like to know, or he, that your thoughts are of them? Okay, this does move it into
like all your thoughts.
Yeah, like
right?
this does move it into an area where you won't hear a lot of Christian channels talking about this.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Yeah.
But I think this needs to be talked about because there's a lot of young men who listen to this show, and I think that it's helpful for anyone, but I think it's helpful here. So with your spouse, the setup is just going to be different. Now, you might say it's still sinful. Okay, but it's still not quite the same, and we need to allow for that. I think that you and your spouse need to discuss this sort of thing, and whatever is happening needs to be something that you both know about and are okay about.
Yeah.
Okay. Really, and so there's an ideal situation here. But I think in general, yes, even in marriage, I think it's best if you live out your sexual experiences with your sexual partner.
Absolutely.
That way. Now, that's not all there is to say about this. Here's what I think about up until that point of marriage. People are getting married later and later. I don't know that I think that's a good idea, but it certainly
Paul didn't either, by the way.
It certainly magnifies it. Yeah. And it certainly magnifies this problem, right? It magnifies, it makes it more likely that you're going to mess up here.
Yeah.
And I think that just as I'm told to be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, and we did a show on that last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever with Nick Quint, just as I'm told to do that, and I realize that I haven't and I won't, I have and will mess up. It's not my intention to do that. That is the repentant posture I think that a young man or woman should have toward this. But that does not mean like, oh, what does Jesus say I have to do? Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Oh, good. Since none of us can live up to that, we don't have to worry about it. No, the reality is you should aim for perfection. Knowing that you will fail, you should aim with every intention to live for God. Now, I've heard it said in my lifetime since I was a teenager that young people, it's putting too much on them, too much burden on them, too much stress on them, too much expectation to imagine that a virgin boy could marry a virgin girl and they could live together faithfully for the rest of their lives. I can tell you, you may think so, but it can be done. It has been done. And on top of that, not only am I'm telling you that after 20 years, more than 20 years of marriage to that woman for me, but I know a guy he and his wife didn't even kiss until they kissed at their wedding, and they've been married for 25 years or something now and have a wonderful marriage. It can happen. With this issue, perhaps I am falling prey to what those people fell prey to who advised me or told me, well, it just can't be done. Maybe someone can live faithfully in this regard in their life as a young person with self-pleasure and all these kind of things. Maybe they really can do that. But I think there is so much of a likelihood that just as be perfect as your Father's, but we know you'll fail, but you shouldn't it's okay because everyone knows I'll fail. That should kind of be the attitude here is, if you screw up on this, it doesn't mean that you're like this cast out of the kingdom, consigned to the flames, filthy, disgusting person. This is a very common thing that happens, but it also doesn't mean that you excuse it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all of that. But I do want to say that, like, in marriage, if you're married and you're thinking about because at root here, the issue is lust, right? The problem is lust, and when you're masturbating, if you're not using porn, you are using a mental image of another human being as an object of your own gratification, and that's wicked.
Mm-hmm. Well, the idea is treating another human being as an object, like you say, like a meat bag, walking down the street, when that is a person that God loves and that Jesus died for and has experiences and has a conscious experience and is far more than just their physical body. And when you marry someone, yes, you enjoy each other's physical bodies. This is a great blessing that goes along with marriage, but it's not, you're not severing the rest of him or her out of the equation.
Right.
You know, so that they're basically just a sex object, like a blow up doll for you. That's not the situation.
I mean,
and
can that happen in a marriage? Sure. Should that happen in a marriage? Never. Right.
And in a marriage in general, you have in a Christian marriage and in a marriage where both people are trying to do things right, then whatever the case may be that you may do in the undefiled wedding bed, as we've discussed. The truth is you have already publicly, legally, financially, in terms of your living setup, decided to share your life with this person and sacrificed for that end. Yeah. And that's just very different.
But if you're a young single man or a woman, I don't know how women deal with this. But if you're single, it seems like a month or two ago, every single fitness influencer that I follow had something to say. It was a big trend. They all had something to say about semen retention. Mm-hmm. So go check out those videos to find out that don't masturbate and check out some health benefits that'll help your fitness. So go for that.
So honestly, atheists, back around to this thing again. I think this is a helpful point of clarification. Disguising or justifying hatred as righteousness is a very slippery slope. And I don't advocate it. Like, that's just the end. I don't advocate disguising or justifying hatred as righteousness. That is a very slippery slope. In fact, it's not even a slippery slope. It's just sin.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it's the same, you know, we run into that because you see a lot of evangelicals who do that. You see a lot of evangelicals who use certain things like, well, this is being loving, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of evangelicals will use sound doctrine. He has sound doctrine, so therefore he can say all kinds of awful things about other people because at least he has sound doctrine. So, but if any other type of Christian that was like heterodox or whatever talked that same way, the same person who used sound doctrine as a shield to spew all sorts of hateful things will spew hateful things towards that heterodox person who behaved in exactly the same manner. So yes, I agree with that. It's a slippery slope. I agree that it should give everyone pause. But before you look, if you're just like shock 24/7, people get immune to that anyway. But before you decide to say something that's going to shock people out of a slumber, you should have considered it for some time before you just up and do it. I certainly agree with that.
And he mentions the Nazis were motivated by love of their countrymen and their party. But here's the thing. If what people like me and Pritchett were saying was, because of our love for people like us, we're going to act this way or say these things. But we would be saying very different things, I think. What we're doing here is we're saying, no, because of our love for everyone. Yeah. You know, and I think that's a big difference there.
Even the people that we're saying something bold to.
That's right. Particularly them.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to some super chats here. That's all the video clips. So Numa says, conservatives don't pass policies that help working people. They defund public schools, keep wages low, pass tax cuts for the rich, etc. Shapiro literally said we should give kids free lunch.
I don't know about that. It seems like it was the working class people that overwhelmingly vote Republican now, and it's white college educated millennials and billionaires that all vote for Democrats. But whatever you think about those policies, me personally, you can't defund public schools enough. It's time to get rid of the public education system. It's been a disaster. Keep wages low. I don't like that.
And despite our best efforts, it's a politics show.
Also, as far as tax cuts for the rich, both parties do that. The Democrats could have raised taxes on millionaires and billionaires in the past 2 years while they still had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and guess what? They did not, because what they do is, just like Republicans and Democrats both, is what you need to understand is sometimes they want the issue to campaign on instead of actually doing something about the issue. I've said on this channel, I don't care how much they want to tax LeBron James, Nancy Pelosi, and Jeff Bezos. I don't care how much. I don't think we should have any sort of compulsory taxes at all. But if you're going to have them, then I agree. The uber rich should pay their fair share. I've said both of those things. You could hold both of those positions. Taxation is theft. Let's get rid of taxation and just have a consumption tax. But if we're going to have the system we have, tax them. And guess what? Neither party will do it because that's taxing their campaign donors. And the millionaire and billionaire campaigner donor class, Democrats outspend Republicans 2-to-1 to 10-to-1. So they're the big rich. The Democrat party's party of the rich.
Also, A.E. Numa says Ronald Reagan's policy have destroyed America and the middle class. The government used to cover 80% of the cost of college. Now it's 20%. Reagan put taxes on Social Security benefits, bad stuff. Well, thank you for your super chat.
Yeah, I was. I don't remember. That was the 80s. I was not caring. But I mean, Ronald Reagan. I know that he is held in high esteem by a lot of people on the right.
The actor.
Yeah. I don't get the appeal. But yeah. I mean, he's
he
not
just
like
ticked off all the people that liked you.
I mean, I don't know that he was the great. People say he's the greatest president of my life. I heard that so much, and I'm just like, well,
who is?
I don't like.
Listen,
any
just
of them.
don't answer that.
I don't even like.
Robert gives us $49.99. Thank you so much, Robert.
Thanks, Skyler.
Happy Good Friday. Pritchett was bragging on you.
And
just
I am
yesterday.
sorry that. By the way, Robert, I am so sorry that I'm just bombarding you with work. I know you don't.
Good question. Says preachers that rail against something trying to compensate out of guilt for doing that something themselves. Yeah, there are preachers that do that, although I don't think you can assume that about any particular preacher. I've heard it said throughout my life that, well, that preacher, he's preaching about porn too much. He's probably into porn, and he's preaching what he's guilty of. Maybe. How do you know?
Yeah. But on the other
I would say
hand,
just as many preachers probably say, I'm not preaching about that because I'm doing it.
There are preachers that have preached against porn, preached against homosexuality, preached against this, preached against that, and you find out they're guilty of it, though.
Mm-hmm. That's true. It goes both ways. I'm just saying, how do you know? How does any particular person know? Not trying to be hard on you. Good question.
Yeah. The issue is you don't know until you do know.
Right.
But just using that as like your guide, like if they're railing against something, they're obviously doing it themselves. That's not true either. You can't use that as a 100% guarantee that that's the case. In fact,
all right. Well, this has been fun. I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to give you 10 seconds if you want to go ahead and lock in your poll. If you haven't added a vote. It's a really political show. We're voting on things. We've had 72 votes so far. I'm ending it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Dadgummit. End poll. Okay. And that's it. Well, what was it? Wait a minute. Okay, 56%. So are these conservatives mostly right? Yes or no? 56% said yes. 43% said no.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, granted, they're not professional theologians, but I mean, my dad was a Sunday school teacher, could have answered some of these questions a little bit better and more clear than they did. So, I mean, it's a mixed bag for me. But I think we've all learned an important lesson that you should come to Trinity Radio to hear a theological discussion, even on issues that we don't always see eye to eye on. You'll still get a good bit of discussion, and don't try to get your theology from conservative YouTubers.
Yeah, and folks, Leighton Flowers is winning. He's winning. Leighton Flowers is in a race with us to see, and Chris State should be in there, and Tim Stratton and others, and Chris did get one this week, and Tim. But people that fill out requests for more information at Trinity, and then there's a place to click how you found out. And you can click one of these, okay? Listen, if you think you might be interested in seminary education at some time, 3 years from now, or if you want to do it right now, go over to trinitysem.edu. On the right-hand side of the screen, it'll take you 10 seconds. Do that as a Good Friday gift for Trinity Seminary and Trinity Radio. And we will greatly appreciate that, because really we do want students, but we also want to cream Leighton Flowers. That's our what we're trying to accomplish here some of the time. So do you want to add anything to that? I would say it was kind of like a rally cry or a speech before you go off to war. What would you say to that?
Yeah, everyone should come to Trinity some reason or another. That's what I would say. And as far as politicians go, I just want to echo what I said last time. Who was your, before we go, do you have a favorite president? No? I don't either, because I don't see the reason for citizens to be loyal to their politicians and fanboys of them. So when they do something good, clap your hands. If they do something bad, give them thumbs down. That's their people. They're politicians. They work for the people. So that's all I got to say about that. And get your theology from Trinity Radio and a few of our friends, and go get your seminary education to learn about the Bible and theology at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary. And with that, we're out. We'll see you next time. God bless.